How are you doing, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel. Today we're going to be breaking down some of my biggest takeaways from Week 8 fantasy football, breaking down some of the stuff I saw, and obviously looking forward, what my expectations are for some players, situations, teams, all that great stuff in today's episode. So if you're new around here, as always, feel free to drop on down, smash that subscribe button, and turn the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content. I have also dropped my must-add players for this week for the waiver wire for Week 9, so go check that video out and let me know any thoughts or questions you have about that episode as well in the comment section below or our community Discord, which is linked in the description of today's and every video here on the channel. So we'll be diving into my 10 takeaways from this week's action. Let's get started. All right, let's kick things off for today's episode talking some Denver Broncos football. Now, I typically start this episode with a takeaway from the Thursday night game. However, despite the fact that we had some injuries and some nicks and dings in that game, I didn't think there was anything that was like super outlierish that I felt that needed to be raised as a discussion point here. So we're going to move right along here to Russell Wilson and the Broncos on the other kind of primetime game, which for us watching in the United States was an extremely early, excruciating morning game where I was literally watching this game in bed because I just didn't have the energy to move yet. But I was watching the game, and I did have the takeaway that I think that there is some hope, optimism, and positive energy for fantasy owners of the Denver Broncos after this game. Now, were things pretty for 4 quarters? Absolutely not. I actually posted on IG roasting Russell Wilson and his little, pregame, whatever he's doing with his hands and whatnot. And after watching the first quarter where he went 2 of 5 for 19 yards and a pick, I said, he's getting ready to go out there and stink up the first quarter. But as the game went on, things got better. And situationally, I think this team, I haven't watched every snap of Broncos football this year like a hawk, but I have paid very close attention to it. I felt that situationally this week they were better than they've been most weeks. Now, were they perfect? No. Were they an absolute dominant team through 4 quarters? No. But I felt that in the late stages of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, this team started to get it going. Their defense got a turnover. Trevor Lawrence was a bit sloppy, and then this team converted, and they were able to move the football downfield. KJ Hamler made some plays. Greg Dulcich made some plays. Jerry Jeudy made some plays, being the star receiver of the week. Sutton struggled a little bit, but what I think that at least can be taken away from the game is this: you've got a positive amount of momentum exiting this contest, heading into a long week, and then the bye week here in Week 9. My hope and expectation is that by Week 10, hopefully, and again, this is not me stating this as a definitive, but I think there is reason as owners and managers of these teams and players on the roster here to at least be a bit more excited than we've been the past couple of weeks, because I think you can take that positive energy away from this game, move forward into the bye, continue to clean things up here, and have extended levels of preparation is really what we're going for here to come out Week 10 and be the best version of this team we've seen yet this year. So that's it for the Broncos. I'm not going to spend all day talking through them here, but I did think there was at least, room for improvement, and they started to get a little bit better. This is by no means a high-powered, explosive offense here, but we're looking for things to hopefully trend up and finish better as we get down the stretch of this season. Foreman here, talking through the fact that this might be a starting level lineup caliber player. Now, I had him this week in the low-end RB2 to RB3 conversation. Once Chuba Hubbard was ruled out, he became a firm member of the RB2 conversation. However, he is in opportunities where he's given a starting level workload, he delivers. And is he the most explosive dynamic back in the league? Absolutely not. But this guy has some pedigree to him here. He is a physical player in almost every situational circumstance. I said, hey, first and 10 from the Carolina 11 here. They're going for the end zone. They're going to run the ball. And even though I think the Falcons knew what they were doing, they couldn't stop him. He was physical. He was decisive in his cuts here, and despite the fact that I was actually joking with my buddy watching the games that he was kind of huffing and puffing and had to leave the game a bunch of times just because I don't know if his conditioning is quite on the level of some other full-time starting running backs in the National Football League. He went out there and got the job done. He had 27 opportunities this week, 118 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 30-plus fantasy points. That'll do it. And I think that the case can be made here that he has pushed Chuba Hubbard out as the lead back for this team. Now, do I think he's a full-on workhorse when Chuba's healthy? No. I think that they would prefer to have some level of a 60-40 or 65-35 split here. But I do think that Foreman on the goal line has shown us enough levels of involvement to be the guy here. And I do think that he has been at least competent in the receiving game to still get some opportunities in that phase because Chuba is not necessarily excelling in that area either. So Foreman, I'm keeping an eye on him here as someone that, depending on matchup, very well might just deserve a spot in my lineups going forward on a week-to-week basis, because with that rushing touchdown involvement, PJ Walker seemed to get a little bit of a thing going here with DJ Moore. That's great for more owners. All stuff to be excited and think about here as we move forward this season. David Montgomery, now getting a bit more pessimistic here with our third takeaway of the week, that David Montgomery has a Khalil Herbert problem. And what I mean by this is that he got out-touched by Khalil Herbert in the running game this week. He did add this being David Montgomery 3 receptions for 22 yards, but Herbert rushed the ball 16 times for 99 yards. That is pretty efficient football. That's over 5 yards per carry. And you've got a guy in David Montgomery that ran the football 15 times for just 53 yards, in addition to Justin Fields' 8 carries in the day. So there's a lot of rushing going on in this offense, and it is not specifically Montgomery's work as it has been in years past. So that's something to keep your eye out for. I think that at the end of the day, he needs touchdowns now. He needs extremely efficient play to get the job done. And I think that this is kind of unfortunate because looking back on years past, this is one of the higher players in the snap count percentage, opportunity share in this offense. And Herbert is just flat out delivering in all the touches he gets here. And the Bears aren't paying either of these players, so they don't care who's giving them more touches based on that factor alone. They just want the guy that does the most with the ball in his hands. So right now, that's been Khalil Herbert the last couple of weeks here, and we've seen his opportunity grow and his effectiveness pretty plateaued here and similar in a good way, meaning that he's continuing to produce at a high level for this team. So Montgomery, I'm at least thinking about this moving forward in terms of lineup usage for him here and growing a little bit more skeptical. Tony Pollard here, I've got to take away once again that he has proved he is the best running back in this backfield, and at the same time, the Cowboys have proved how stubborn they are. After the game, Jerry Jones comes out here after Tony Pollard absolutely goes berserk. 14 rushes, a $131, 3 touchdowns, averaging 9.35 yards per carry, which is elite. He ripped off the, game-icing touchdown on the left sideline. They go out there and say, there is no running back controversy. Ezekiel Elliott is still the guy. Zeke is not anywhere nearly as efficient, as explosive, or dynamic as Tony Pollard, yet they continue to give him the benefit of the doubt because he makes more money for this team. And is that a flawed way to look at things from the outside perspective that I have? Of course it is. Tony Pollard delivers every time this guy gets the ball, and he could easily be a more effective fantasy football player. But again, the takeaway is twofold here. I still am of the belief that Tony Pollard's the best running back in this offense, but I also believe at the same time that the Cowboys do not care what he's doing. Tony Pollard cannot, he could run the ball 200 yards on 4 carries and 4 touchdowns, and they would still continue to give Zeke the ball. So basically, this is a helpless cry that Tony Pollard owners, I'm sorry, I'm not getting excited that you're going to have a potential, league-winning running back here, because I just, at the end of the day, do not trust that Dallas will make a move in their best interest in the run game here to actually consistently give him 15-plus touches per game, which he did get this week with another reception for 16 yards, so 147 total yards on the day. Kyle Pitts here. Again, kind of a prove yourself type thing here. Kyle Pitts reasserted and proved himself as one of the most dominant tight ends in this league. However, I still don't think we can trust him in fantasy. Kyle Pitts' best play of the game, aside from his touchdown reception, was a smoke screen that was a check down pass, not a drawn up play. It was a check down from Marcus Mariota under pressure that Kyle Pitts literally did unworldly things with the football in his hands, making defenders miss, breaking tackles, and taking that ball from near the midfield point all the way down the field. So essentially here, what you've got is, again, an all-world player that coming into the season we were all over. We knew how talented he was. We've seen the numbers that Mariota produced for Delaney Walker in the past. But despite the fact that he's coming off of a season high in yardage at 80 and targets at 9, I don't think that going forward, this is entirely enough for me to change our thought process and outlook on Kyle. Now, does this make things exciting, more optimistic? Of course it does. You don't want to just brush this off and dismiss it, but I do still think that the problems we saw early in the season will be present and prevalent to an extent moving forward. So, Kyle Pitts, again, the arrow is up. It is green right now. However, I'm still going to, I'm at least, tapping the brakes a little bit here in terms of taking this thing off as a breakout game for him this season. We had this takeaway somewhat last week, but Ramondre Stevenson continues to show me that he is the lead horse for this backfield, and more so as an overarching takeaway, this Patriots offense as a whole. This is the guy that runs this team because the quarterback play has been so bad. Mac Jones has been incredibly unreliable, and Ramondre continues to produce. So the reason this game was such a big deal for me last week, I kind of took it with a grain of salt. Game 1 with the running back, hamstring issue, soft tissue stuff, you're going to be conservative in your approach, your overall usage of him in that game. So I expected Damien Harris to clearly be the lesser utilized running back of the two. In this game, second game back for Damien Harris here, 16 touches for on the ground for Ramondre Stevenson to 11 for Damien Harris. Ramondre had 71 yards versus 37 for Damien Harris on those 11 touches versus 16. So yes, more opportunities, but also more efficiency for Ramondre Stevenson in that category. Ramondre also added 7 for 72 in the pass catching game. He is the 3-down back for this team, or at least preferred to be used in that fashion. Damien is always going to have some level of usage in the run game for this team as long as he's a member of the Patriots. But Stevenson is the more effective player when touching the football and the more dynamic player in terms of his ability to get in space and deliver in that area. So I'm looking at all this stuff, again, chalking this up as Damien Harris's second game back on the field. And my takeaway is that this is expected to be the trend going forward here. And this is a player that I think continues to produce very, very solid fringe RB1 to RB2 level production on a week-to-week basis. CMC here of the 49ers. Now, this is a game without Deebo Samuel, so let's just lay that context out there before we even get into this take here. But I think he will be perfectly used for this team. This is going to seem like kind of an overstatement and kind of, like I'm reading a little bit too much into things here. But the most encouraging thing I saw all day was not that he was the first player since 2005 to have a rushing, receiving, and passing touchdown. It was that on a simple, routine passing down where Jimmy Garoppolo dropped back to throw the football, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, bang. Ball out, swing past CMC, pressure was getting to him. That was where he looked to go with the football a week and a half into this process. If that is his thought going forward, and that is how he's going to be used as the frequent checkdown option for this team, a staple in the passing game, we know he's going to work running the football there because that's what this team does. He is going to crush it and kill it. And the game script for this team, they dominated the Rams once again as expected. They're going to go out there, put up points, and he's going to get frequent red zone opportunities and just chances to be a playmaker, which, he was getting force-fed the ball in Carolina, but it's not like he was really doing anything with it because he was the only option for that team. And now, honestly, it's this weird thing where you're seeing kind of both sides thrive and flourish without each other because now Carolina's kind of a bit more unpredictable offensively for at least the last couple of weeks here while they are in their transition period. And now CMC, of course, is just in a better overall offensive situation. So I love this usage for CMC. Again, it seems like a small thing, but that check down pass, that swing pattern, even while being covered by Bobby Wagner on this play, was just extremely encouraging to me because if Jimmy's going to keep feeding him the rock in that fashion and getting him those quick and easy PPR points, and CMC is a guy that can go out there and turn those into 7 and 8 yard plays on a routine basis without getting tackled. So much stuff I loved about that dynamic and involvement in the offense. Poor Darrell Henderson here, talking through some Rams offensive backfield stuff now. So this was one of, again, my more pessimistic takes of the week. This backfield is an absolute nightmare. Now, as if we didn't already know that with the Cam Akers Darrell Henderson dynamic here, things are even uglier now and atrociously hideous. If we're looking at the backfield distribution of this committee from this week, Ronnie Rivers led the way with 8 rushing attempts, and this is an awful offensive line as well that continues to get more injured, was undermanned and under-talented to begin with. Red flag after red flag after red flag here. Again, Ronnie Rivers led the way with 8 rushes. 4 rushes for 16 yards for Darrell Henderson, 5 rushes for 10 yards for Malcolm Brown, who looks chonky as ever, coming back into that backfield after spending some time with the Miami Dolphins. So this is just a broken backfield dynamic right now. If you're going to be breaking down these touches to these players, there was a circumstance where multiple times they were trying to run the ball into the end zone. They ended up getting 8 swings at the bat and then Matthew Stafford ended up having the most awkward dive over the pylon I've ever seen. Also, Cooper Kupp was getting rushing opportunities. It was a total mess, and they ended up losing by 17 points, and obviously Cooper Kupp turned his ankle late in the game. That was a disaster as well. But back to the main takeaway here is that you had an offensive line that's so bad and a lack of talent in this running back room where they were going to go 4 and out, and then they got a penalty to reset the down and get, 4 more swings at things here, and they try and run the ball over and over again on the goal line with Malcolm Brown, and he just continues to get stuffed and stymied, and it's just a representation of this offense and what's been happening here, especially in the run game. It's been a nightmare. So you've got potentially Kyron Williams coming back off IR this week to add another name into this fray. We'll see if he actually takes this thing over or if it continues to be the clown show in this backfield. But man, these players are not high-level competitors. Ronnie Rivers, I'm sorry. Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson, I think is a nice player, but is not an elite running back by any stretch of the imagination. It has been a struggle bus for this team in 2022 as a whole, and the ground game has been a big part of it, and the offensive line obviously attributes to that as well. Last 2 takeaways of the day here, starting with Jonathan Taylor. Now, my takeaway from this game is that maybe some of you were already here last week or even sooner, but I think it's time that we take him out of the elite running back ones conversation. Now, do I still think he's a strong running back one? Potentially. Maybe, at the point of the Colts offensive attack kind of deteriorating right now and going through a bit of a transition. We'll see if they come out stronger next week. But there's a case to be made that he might be a fringe running back one by season's end if his injuries continue to persist here. If the ankle never gets 100% healthy, that flared up again in this game. He had to get his ankle retaped. That's going to affect his play here. So if you don't have a high level of offensive output, if your offensive line is deteriorating to an extent here, and if you've got just a situation that is not ideal, that's going to impact your running back. So I was holding on to hope because of the fact that guys like Deion Jackson were coming in here and giving us high-level fantasy lineup production games. So I had, optimism to an extent, but this game against Washington was kind of telling to me. I think it was a bit troublesome. There was a lot of passing situations where I think they should have just turned around and handed the ball off, and they didn't. So a lot of questionable play calling from this offensive staff overall this season. There's been a lot of situational football where I'm like, turn around and hand the ball at 28. It's the best player on the field and your best chance to score or convert a first down. And that just hasn't played out throughout this year. So disappointed from top to bottom here with the Colts, Jonathan Taylor. We kind of saw this coming, though. I mean, this is a guy that when we looked at the numbers and the extreme discrepancy between his RB1 finish last year, which is extremely weak as compared to the rest of the sample since dating back to CMC's 2019 finish per se, the points per game differential between Jonathan Taylor's, 21 fantasy points per game versus what was CMC close to 28. So I think that overall it was just kind of to be anticipated to have a drop off here this season. It wasn't expected that he'd be the turnaround back-to-back RB1, but drafts at the end of the day, he was the safe pick, and that's kind of proving to be a mistake across the board. So for those of you guys that took CMC first and sucked it up and didn't play scared fantasy football, props to you because you're thriving right now as your player is in a far better circumstance and situation than Jonathan Taylor is today as a member of the Colts. All right, then last up here, we're going to start and end today's episode talking about 2 absolutely trash offenses that have really created fantasy football turmoil this year. But I, once again, think that this Packers team, much like I started the video off with the Broncos offense, have the arrow pointed in the right direction, and I saw some positive things late in this game that I hope this team can bring forward. It is 100% true, and the reality of the situation, that the Packers straight up sucked on 4th down last night. The Bills completely shut them out, shut down Aaron Jones at times at 4th down, created no passing windows for Aaron Rodgers. They struggled in the red zone and in 4th down situations. This is bad. However, this team between the 20s was pretty good. They were moving the football up and down the field. I think Aaron Jones had his best overall usage of the season, 20 rushes, $143, and A.J. Dillon had 10-plus opportunities as well. So these are things this offense needs to do, that they finally got in their heads in a do-or-die game, which they died, I guess, if you will. They somewhat got it together. Now, they were going to score 20 points. Mason Crosby missed a deep field goal. Is he really capable of that distance at this point in his career? Probably not. They played sloppy early, and they played aggressive sloppy football early, but they cleaned it up late. Samori Toure made a big play. Romeo Doubs showed that he can continue to make plays down the sideline. So I think that overall, while I'm not arguing that this offense is elite and going to save your season here, I do think there's an opportunity where your Packer players rostered on your team can maybe contribute a little bit more to your lineups going forward. They've got Detroit this week, an extremely easy matchup. If they take the positives away that they ended this game off with, convert those into success next week, and then build positive momentum here, the pieces are in play here that if they use them properly, play mistake-free football, and improve situationally, this team can actually be competent offensively. And therefore, for guys like Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, maybe even Aaron Rodgers, maybe even Romeo Doubs. Robert Tonyan, surprisingly, I heard last night he's 6th in receptions amongst tight ends. So you might have 4 or 5 fantasy relevant players coming out of this offense that are, none of them are going to be elite here per se, but they are going to contribute respectable production that you can use and, count towards stacking wins for your team. So positives there taken away from Denver and Green Bay. I know it's not the easiest thing to look at right now, and obviously the clear-cut takeaway, but those are things I felt coming out of that game that I wanted to address with you guys moving into this week. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more episodes. We've got our waiver wire episode out today, so go check that out and take a look at things if you're wondering what the heck just happened. My frame of my glasses are broken, and every once in a while they just pop apart, and they fell apart today. So whatever, it happens. It happened in a video last week. If you guys enjoyed, again, subscribe, like today's episode. Let me know your questions, comments, concerns in the comment section of today's episode. Join the community Discord server, and I'll see you guys in a future video this week. Peace out.